Perfect. So this is going to be the first photo that I'm going to kind of be discussing. And I've put the camera settings down at the bottom for you guys to kind of have a look at them. And yeah, so I can explain them better because otherwise I have to go find them. A lot of the time my camera settings are just to balance out with the lights, because when you're using a lot of different light, it's difficult to balance them all depending if they're not all the same power output. So for instance, the stellar lights are much more powerful, much more. Dave, your English teacher, that was much more correct sentence because that is absolutely atrocious in my head. Yeah, so because it's a lot more powerful, a lot more sounds better, than the 60s, the TL60s that I was using, I had to balance it out with my camera settings. But that being said, with the camera settings, I wanted a shallow depth of field. Now I know with a lot of photography, and I'll show you with other images, that I don't always go with that rule. A lot of people go with the lowest f-stop, like f2.8 or 1.8 or 1.4 or 1.2. But I didn't want like that. That wasn't the main purpose. I wanted that shallow depth of field because I wanted the hair to start blurring in the background. And because I can do this now, which is amazing. And I can pick color. Check. Stream's still good. Yeah, stream's still good. Okay. Now, as you can see in the background, this hair here is out of focus. Also, here on the shoulder, it's out of focus. And you're also getting a little bit of focal fall off here on the cheek, which was kind of the purpose because I wanted to draw more attention to the eye. So that the eye is more sharp. Now that is normally, in portrait photography for sure, but I wanted that focal fall off towards the back because I wanted to get softer so that the lines and the rest of my body isn't as in focus as it would have been if I was shooting at a higher f-stop, which I'll show you an example of later. Now, minimize that. I've also spoken about the lights, and as you can see at the bottom, it's saying how many lights I was using, and I was using 5 lights. Now I know a lot of people don't have access to that, but I was using a 5 light setup for this. But we'll get into all the lights and their purposes later. Let's talk a little bit more about the camera setting. The shutter speed is at 160th of a second. Now that's also done on purpose because when you're working with mixed lighting, you have a threshold where your shutter speed starts, what I always say, you get ambient light contamination. And that's what I was looking for. As bad as the word contamination sounds, I was looking for some ambient light contamination. And we'll just make another layer for that and pick a different color. So it's fun. Go with green. So what I mean by that is, as you can see here on the shoulder, and also for the background, I wanted some ambient light contamination. And that is achieved by an f-stop, normally around 100th of a second. The lower you go, the more contamination you get. So this works wonderful when you're shooting stuff indoors and you've got a lot of ambient light, like incandescent light and stuff like that, and you are trying to get the environment lights working within your photo. And that can be achieved by lowering your shutter speed. It can't be achieved by making your ISO higher or making your f-stop higher or lower or any of that thing. It only gets achieved by playing around with your shutter speed. And when you go to what is flash sync speed, that is when you start eliminating ambient light. So that is why the shutter speed is as low as 160th of a second, which if you had to go with the rule of, double the focal length, I'm breaking the rule there because I was shooting with a 100mm macro at f2.8. And obviously, if you wanted to go with double, then it would have been in 200th of a second. So yeah, everybody catching up so far? Everybody understand the method to my madness? And because I was taking these things in account, obviously I was compensating with the ISO. That's the reason why the ISO is above 1000. It's at 1250th of a second. So, any questions about camera settings and why I chose the camera settings that I did? As you can see, I've got chat open off to the side here. And I've got time to answer as many questions as you guys would like. Okay. I don't see anybody typing, so it seems like we're all good, all nice. All right. Okay. So let's talk about the lights, because I think that is what a lot of people want to know is lighting and why I've chosen certain, the lights in this way. It looks very, how can I say, very messy. You have, let's see, I'm going to choose another color because I can. So you've got the lights over here. That's kind of like crisscross, just looks like a mixed mesh. You got this light over here. And you also have two lights here in the background. Now that's a lot of lights for this one image, right? Now there was method to the madness. There is a reason they are set up the way they've been set up. So I'm going to ask, why is that? Any guesses to some of our veteran photographers in the chat? Dave, Kat, any guesses? Kim, Brand? Got some time? Okay, fine. I'll explain. Okay. So we're going to break this down. I've had a lot of fun today building this whole, illustration. And I'm actually quite excited. So we're going to start off with the key light. Now the key light is obviously, the main light. And it's the one that is projecting this pattern on her face. And that is this light right over here. Now that is done that way with a projection mount attachment. Now let's show you guys what that is. And I think it is that thing over there. So let me make it bigger. Gee. Put it over here. That is the projection mount attachment that I was using for this image specifically. Okay. And that is the main light that is projecting this pattern that you see here on her face, which was obviously intended. So that is how we get the key light. And that is why we were using that key light. And I was using the Stellar CLX10 because I found it's one of the more powerful video lights that I have, because for this, you can do it with flash, but it's a lot more difficult because you can't see where this thing is projecting, because you can only judge where it's projecting every time you take a photo, unless you have a flash that has got a really good continuous light, which most of them suck. So I was using the Stellar CLX10 because it is really powerful and I can get low ISO with it. And that is it there. This is the CLX10. And it's actually become one of my favorite pieces of lighting kit that I own. So, yeah, I was using that, and that is obviously what you can see that is projecting the light, and it's got great battery life, and that is how I achieved this result and got the projection hitting just exactly where I wanted, because I didn't want it to affect her eyes. I have a couple of shots where she obviously moves around and it hits the eyes, and you kind of get these like black stripes over the eyes. I don't like that because it kind of takes away that little catch light. So that is the key light. Next up, full light. Now, with full light, there's a lot of different ways you can interpret full light. In this manner, we were using full light for the background. Because I wanted this really clean white background, we were using some full light in the background, and these are the lights that are doing the filling. This is hitting the background, making that beautiful white abyss that you see there. And again, obviously done with intention because of the rim light that we were adding. So let's check out the rim light. I can't say much about the full light because literally what it's doing is making sure the background's white, which often if you're working with lights in a small space and stuff like that and a projection and all those things, you often get shadows on a background, mainly the shadows of the model standing there. And if the projection is hitting her in a certain angle, it's obviously creating a shadow on the background of the model and the projection, because the studio isn't as bright as the lights. So we're using full to make sure to just wash it out. This works wonderful with a white background, not so nice with a black background or color background, because if you're pumping out more light than what is kind of needed, or trying to pump out more light than what is from the full light or the key light, then you're going to sit with maybe a washed out color background or washed out, like your black background's going to go great. So yeah, next up, rim light. Any questions so far? I look to my side every now and then. None so far? Cool. Rim light. And the rim light are these lights. Now, the rim light actually is one of the main players in the motivation behind this image that I was creating. And we're going to use the same blue because as we'll switch off key light and full light, just so that the rim light's more apparent. And the rim light was mainly done, I didn't want this hard projection on her. I wanted it to fade out in the same way that it is fading out right here on her shoulder. I wanted it to fade out, kind of as it gets to the corners of her body, that it's not this clean projection there. And also, I wanted a little bit of rim hitting here on the eyes, and obviously here on the cheeks. This is also being made by the fill, because obviously when you're pumping out a lot of light on the background, it's obviously spilling to the front. But that is why we're using the rim lights, because I wanted it to create a little bit more of depth, to make the model not look so cut out and flat in the image. And that's just one way you can start creating some depth in your images, is by not always adding shadows, but adding light. Cool. Thanks, Jish. Yeah. Took a lot of thought, but I was quite happy with the process here. And this was inspired also by another image that I saw online. So a lot of it's not always coming up with the things yourself. It's actually seeing what other people are doing and seeing how you can create it by yourself. So the motivation behind this was to get this look and create because often when you see the projection mount being used, it creates a very flat image. And I wanted to figure out a way how I can make this in a brighter environment, because often when you see it, these styles of projection mounts is often used in your noir style photo shoot when you see the blinds and stuff like that. So I wanted to create this really beautiful, clean, white studio background look, and I wanted to figure out a way to actually create depth. And I wanted to create depth with more light instead of more shadow. So that was the motivation behind this photo. And composition-wise, I'm not even going to lie on this one. We did a couple of shots. As you guys can see, the reference image is not the same as the final image, but obviously the same setup was used. We just changed out the different gobo or cookie to get the different patterns because I prefer this pattern. But we kind of played around, and she was just fixing her hair. I snapped a shot. That's one of the wonders of continuous lights. You just can carry on shooting, and the light will stay the same. And it just so happens to be this one. And I love it because in that moment, we also were getting her chin up a little bit more to give her that longer, slimmer neck, which is very often used in fashion photos. You always want to make the neck nice and slim. And the way you can do that is by asking the girl just to raise the chin a little bit. Another good tip is what we were doing is breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. That parts the lips, makes the lips look fuller, and it doesn't look like she's clenching. So yeah, all the lights used in this image was, like I said, the CL10, and we were also using the tube lights, which has become one of my all-time favorite lights that I own. It's the TL60s from Godox, and you can obviously change them into different RGB colors. So, yeah. And then obviously for you who've missed, that is the CL10. And yeah, that is this image. Any questions before we move on to the next one? Any questions about this image? Anything that you think I've missed or haven't spoken about? Even if you just put in chat, I am good. I'd appreciate that. I'm sure somebody wants a question, and don't feel shy to ask a question if you have any. It's all about getting some good answers. Cool. Cat's all good? Good. Well done. Thanks for explaining. Okay, cool. So we'll move on to the next image. And it would be this one.